and I get the kind of the irony of this is we have a webinar to talk about making a physical print, but that's kind of, I guess, what today's time is. A lot of our photographs are going to be shared digitally, but to take the time and really kind of reach back into our heritage as photographers, and to kind of connect with, you know, the past where it's all began. You know, before digital, if you weren't making something physical, then you weren't making anything at all. And I think it's just important to keep that tradition alive. Beside the fact that it's more archival than you know, than a hard drive. A hard drive is going to fail eventually. A print's not just going to fall off the sheet of paper. It's archival. It'll stay there. It'll outlast you, and this really becomes part of your legacy. As a photographer, we may not all be professionals, or but it really gives you the ability to leave a legacy that a next generation or generations can appreciate. They're not probably going to boot up a hard drive to see your work. They're probably going to want to open up and see something physical and something tangible. So I think it's really important that we're making physical things as part of our creative lives. So my mindset and kind of what I've always, you know, just kind of see myself and have encouraged others to think of it like this is, you know, think of yourself as an artist, a photographer, and a printmaker. So we're an artist first. We're craftsmen. We're craftspeople that can assemble a composition in a coherent way to convey an artistic vision. We're photographers in the sense that we craft light. We use a camera, whether that be an iPhone, whether that be, you know, a high-end digital camera, or, you know, or even a film camera. That doesn't exclude film here even. But we're taking an image to craft light, to capture a subject, and communicate. And then we're printmakers. You know, not every image we take is going to make a great print. We certainly, you know, make a lot of, I certainly fail a lot in my artistic and, you know, photographic vision. But when you get an image that you feel is worthy of taking to that level of making a print, because there is investment in time, there's investment into the money for the ink and for the paper, and, you know, there's time and effort that goes into making a print. But the process of considering an image for print, of reviewing it as a whole and in parts to make sure your artistic vision is clearly represented in something tangible, is a great process and great exercise to go through as a photographer, and as an artist as well. So I always like to encourage people to think of themselves as photographic craftsmen and photographic technician, because there's the artistic side of what we do as photographers. And then there's some technical things that we need to understand to help convey our artistic vision. So we're leveraging the technology that we have to express our creative thoughts here. So if we're going to kind of start in with this, we're going to kind of build a working definition of what creative or what color management is. You know, if we're going to think about it, we can call it something along the lines of using tools that define and quantify color to correct and communicate. So this is really about anything that's involved with effective color communication. You know, think of color as a language. It's you know, these are color management tools are meant to take that that color language and help you speak with it fluently. It's going to take information, help you move it from screen to print. You can use tools that help you translate color from the real world to the digital world. These are all anything that's involving, you know, color communication is what we're going to talk about as far as color management goes. And really, it's about having a plan. It's planning ahead. It's if you need to capture someone's portrait, you know, planning ahead. You know, making sure you're using a color card to help correct color in the post-production. or a gray card to help get the skin tones right. And, you're planning ahead. You photograph your subject with that in mind. It's making sure you've got your monitor calibrated and making sure you've got the right ICC profiles for your printer. It's about having a plan for effective communication. I think the big picture is that, we all, I hear it often that we all perceive color differently. And that's true. We have there are different factors in that. But I think it's important to establish that there is a way to measure color absolutely in the world. We all perceive it a little bit differently. Our biology goes into that, whether male or female, whether we have some kind of color deficiency in our eyes, that impacts how we see color. Lighting environment, that influences how we perceive the color in the world around us. For instance, just simply if we're in a room that has green walls and we have warm lighting, that color is going to appear different than if it was in cool lighting. So the temperature of the light that's falling on a subject is going to impact how we perceive that environment or that color. Our mood, whether we're angry or happy or sad or whatever, that also does impact our color perception. And then food and drink. If you're drinking coffee, caffeine is something that's going to help you, going to make you see things a little warmer. It might not be perceptible at all times, but that does give a tendency to make you perceive things. So I think all that to be said, when making color management decisions, our eyes are not necessarily the best tools to use to evaluate color. And I think that really kind of brings in the need for a reliable, unbiased device to make sure that what we're seeing and how we work with color digitally is effective if we're using an unbiased device here. So if we're going to talk about, what we want to do is really relate this to, very practical terms of what it means to use a color managed workflow. Some terms that you should be aware of: gamut, and that relates to the the range of color that a particular device can represent. So if you've got a wide gamut monitor or a standard gamut monitor, that relates to how many colors can be represented on that on that device, on that display. Paper has gamut. There's a certain range of color and tone that can be represented on a piece of paper. Color space versus gamut. So color space is an absolute term. So you can use one of these color spaces to compare say for your monitor. You can compare your monitor against one of these color spaces. So if you've got an Adobe RGB monitor, that means that your monitor's gamut is approaching the color space of Adobe RGB, or it encompasses Adobe RGB. That's often, an often way to compare color space and gamut. And then the software you're using also has a color space, and that's called your working color space. And basically that's how your program handles color management, whether it's using Adobe RGB, ProPhoto RGB, sRGB. You've probably heard of all that before. So those are just some terms to kind of make sure we're getting on, that we understand here. So there's a lot of ways that we can a lot of pitfalls, if you will, in a typical photographic workflow. A lot of problems can occur because you've got to, if you're thinking about this, you've got to be able to translate, you've got to capture and translate color from the world around us. You've got to put that into your camera's got to take that and make a digital file. You've got to put it into your hard drive or your computer. You've got to represent it on your screen. You've got to effectively edit your photo or transform it in some way that it's ready for either print or another use. You've got to be able to take that image from your hard drive and either send it to the web or save it for long-term use, or send it to your printer. And there's a lot of, so every transition and process, you've got to make sure that you're effectively communicating color between each step. And that's really the powerful thing of color management, is that it's anything you do to keep color consistent is what we're referring to. And so it means, when appropriate, you use the capture calibration tools or the capture color management tools. And you're thinking ahead and having a plan here to make sure your communication is effective. And really the big, if you think of color management, probably the first thing you're going to think about is display calibration. And display calibration is important because, that's your window into your digital world. The color in your image file, it exists in your image file, and your computer has to find a way to translate that image file onto your monitor. And what calibration will do for you is make sure that you're seeing a faithful representation of that image. Now your monitor has a gamut, or there's a particular, like what we were just talking about, there's a particular range of color and tone that can be represented. And your computer's job is to make sure you're seeing that image file faithfully on that screen. We're photographers. We must be able to trust what we see. And we really shouldn't be trusting a monitor that's out of the box. So out of the box monitors are generally too blue, too contrasty, too bright, and too saturated. What calibration is going to do is it's going to identify those deficiencies in your monitor and correct them through an ICC profile. That ICC profile is going to correct the colors that you see on the screen. So it's basically going to adjust the output from your video card to your monitor, so that what you see on screen is effectively a true representation of red, green, and blue. It's going to help you get the monitor to the brightness that it should be for photographic workflow. If you've ever had a print if you've ever heard of anybody complain about a print that comes back too dark, that's often just a monitor issue. Most printing issues really occur at the monitor. I also want to say, if you have a monitor that's been calibrated at the factory, or it says that it's pre-calibrated, that's probably good, but it's going to put you in a better position. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the brightness is set to a level that it should be for a photographic workflow. So calibration will evaluate your monitor and make sure that what you see on screen is an accurate representation of that image file. So it gives you an accurate view into your digital world. And this is, I work for Data Color. This is a spider here, but really all display calibration works the same or similar way. It's going to, you run the program, and during that program, you put a sensor on your screen. During the program, you put the sensor on the screen. It's going to evaluate how color is represented on your display. It's going to help you adjust the brightness of your screen during that process too. And it's going to use that information between, what the program knows what the color should be, and the sensor is going to pick up exactly how the color is being represented, and it's going to build a profile or correction for your display. That correction is used by, it's Mac and PC. There's each of those operating systems can use profiles to correct displays. That's part of it. Saves a file to your operating system at the operating system level. So it's a very simple. It's a pretty hands-off process unless you're adjusting the brightness. With the Spider X, this is the new calibrator that we have. It's it'll calibrate a display in under 2 minutes. So it's very quick, very effective. From high-end displays that require a very good, solid calibrator, that to very basic displays too. It doesn't matter if you're using the most basic of laptops to the high-end, the highest end displays. The Spider will work, and it does a very, very nice job. So that's kind of a high-level example of how data color can color calibrate a display with Spider X. A couple other considerations is, when you're working on a calibrated monitor, when you're doing color critical work, you should be doing that in a darkened room. You don't want any desk lamps on. You want your monitor to be the brightest light source, basically, in the room. And that's going to really help with your color perception. There's, if you've got a light on next to you, that's going to impact how you see color on your monitor. You want to calibrate once a month is what we recommend. That's a pretty, what's the word for it? It's a pretty, that once a month process is probably is more of a holdover from older displays technology that would drift more. But it's still a good exercise to be doing once a month, just to kind of keep and make sure your monitor is faithfully showing you the right colors. Spider X takes 2 minutes. It's really not that big of a deal. Sometimes I'll do it right before I make a print, or before I start editing an image for print. But it's really not a difficult or a complicated process to do. So I think I'm going to go ahead and pause here and to see if there's anybody that wants me to talk more about display calibration. Any other questions? How am I doing?
What can you say about the calibration of the mobile devices?
Mobile devices, I wish there was a way to do it, but the mobile operating systems just don't have. You can calibrate an individual an app. So if an app has color management, it can do it. But unfortunately, a mobile operating system just doesn't have the use of ICC profiles like a Mac or PC would have. Now, I personally use an iPad for a lot of I do some design work for laser engraving and that type of thing. And I don't have an iPad Pro, but it makes sense to me that an iPad Pro should have calibration, ability. But unfortunately, both Android and iPad OS just don't support it. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's just not possible on a global level like it is on a computer. We used to have an app called Spider Gallery, and that was just a kind of a photo viewing app, and you could calibrate the app itself, but that really it was okay, but it really wasn't what it needed, what a mobile device would need for calibration.
Can you give us a perspective on the using of different color settings, camera versus the software versus printer?
Say that one more time.
Well, let's say you have a camera which has color setting for RGB.
Sure.
Now you do post processing, and your software is set for Adobe Color. Then so do you see that as a problem? Would you recommend rather have same color settings on all your stages of the processing or not?
Yeah, I do recommend that you set the camera to Adobe RGB to give you, the sRGB and the Adobe RGB setting in a camera really is going to assign a profile or a color space to the image if it's a non-raw capture. So if it's a raw image, the the color space is assigned in the raw processor itself. So that would be, so I would certainly, I use raw and JPEG, for a lot of the family stuff and very casual stuff that I'm photographing. I'll use JPEG in my Sony, but so I do keep that as Adobe, just to give myself the latitude in what's captured. For raw capture, it's not going to really make a difference. On the back of your camera, that's going to be an sRGB representation of your image if you're curious. So it's going to take the image file and show you a preview in an sRGB color space. But yeah, it is important to make sure you're working in probably in an Adobe RGB color space in Photoshop. I believe Lightroom uses ProPhoto as the default color space for working color space. So it really shouldn't be an issue going from Lightroom to Photoshop. I know I use Capture One a little bit for my own raw processing, and that you have some flexibility in that. That handles color just a little bit differently than the Adobe products, but yeah, I would say work in Adobe most of the time. And then if you're going to anything that has a lot of heavy processing, like if you're really recovering, details in clouds and sky, that's probably when you want to use ProPhoto RGB for the editing, to give yourself the latitude and in the push and the pull in the software. And then output your image file to the to the profile you need. So if you're going to save it to web, go ahead and save it as sRGB. If you're going to send it to an outside printer, ask them how they want you to prepare the file. A lot of them will just say sRGB, but just that's a good conversation to have if you're not doing the printing yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. So, just so I understand this correctly, once you calibrate the system, you don't touch the brightness on your display.
Right. Yeah. So that's going to relate to, if you're going to make a print. So generally, what the standard convention is that between 100 and 120 candelas per meter squared, and that's a measurement of luminance or brightness of your screen, is where you want to have your brightness set. You don't want to, if you go above that, you're going to start getting prints that look a little bit darker or denser than what you see on the monitor. And really the goal is to give yourself a good, the 100 or 120, brightness recommendation is kind of thinking downstream. Gives you the ability to better represent what you're going to get in a print on screen. Now, if you want to go in and adjust your monitor, based on the tasks that you're doing. So if you're in a brightly lit room, say you take your laptop outside or on your deck or something, and you want to do some emails or writing or whatever, it's okay, adjust the brightness where you want it. But when you get back down to doing color critical work, get that monitor, bring the brightness down where it was at calibration, so that you're seeing, your shadow tones, especially, that are represented properly on screen. Okay. So we're going to briefly touch on printer profiling, and then what we'll do is we'll get into Lightroom and Photoshop and just kind of walk through the highlights of each of those programs. But once you've got a calibrated monitor, once you're ready to send a print to or an image to the printer, you've got to help the printer, in a sense here, understand how to translate or print color from your image file onto the paper. So every printer has a unique fingerprint. You know, paper and ink influence color tones and color range differently. Different papers, you know, show red. You know, if we're going to talk, you know, different papers will influence your image. Your image will look different on different papers, I guess is the way I'm trying to say it. What an ICC profile does is it takes into account, or an ICC paper profile or printer profile, is it takes into account the way your printer prints on a certain paper. So this is basically a set of instructions that your printer uses during printing. And it kind of comes in two different flavors, if you will. There's a generic ICC, and then there's a custom ICC. A generic ICC or general ICC is something that's supplied by the paper manufacturer or the printer manufacturer. So if say you've got an Epson printer and you're using Epson paper, they're also going to supply ICC profiles for the papers that they provide and sell, and that's to help give you, you know, the best print on that through that printer on that paper. A custom profile is what a tool like Spider Print will make. It's going to give you the ability to characterize how your printer prints on a particular paper. So it's going to kind of, you know, narrow it down to a particular printer instead of a particular range of printers. So it gives you the ability to make a custom profile for the way that your printer is operating. So every printer does change a little bit over time. This gives you the ability to really kind of hone in and maximize what your printer's capabilities can do by making a custom profile. Yeah, so that's a process that's a little more involved than display calibration. So the process is that you use our software, Spider Print. You print out color charts on the paper that you want to profile or make a custom profile for. You let it dry. You know, you've got to give it time to cure and set. And then you take a sensor like our Spider Print sensor, and then you measure each of the patches. And like the process of display calibration, the software knows how those colors should be represented on the paper, and it's going to make a little correction for each of those patches. Spider Print is a pretty robust tool in the sense that it gives you the ability to, you know, there are gray targets to calibrate. There are, I think it goes from like 225 to up to 729 different patches of color that you can use to profile your printer and make those custom ICC profiles. And generally what I've found is that, you know, if you've got a luster or gloss paper, the profiles from the manufacturers are going to be pretty good. When you start getting into metallic papers and the art papers and the matte papers and rag papers, that's where I've seen the biggest difference in making a custom profile. So, you know, there are just understand that there are two flavors here, if you will, a generic or general profile, and then a custom profile. That one is the general profile is made for a particular line of printers. So I've got an Epson R3000 here in my office, and I have profiles from Epson that will work well on all Epson R3000s, and then I've made my own profiles for other papers as well. So I've got particular profiles that are tuned for my own printer, and then I've got the generic ones that came from Epson.
Question?
Yeah.
Ink aside of the framing is probably the most important part, most expensive part of the process. What's your take on using OEM ink? Do you have a success? If you do you have a success using them?
You know, I've never used a third-party ink, and yes, ink is the most important or most expensive part of the whole process. I truthfully don't have much to say, comparing one to the other. I've always taken the stand that, say Epson formulates their inks in a certain way that will work more effectively on their, on their papers, with their printer. So I've always taken I always would want to get the most out of the printer, and I'm I'll pay a little more to use the Epson ink in my work, and the same would go for Canon as well. I just want to make sure I'm putting the best ink to get the best, the widest gamut out of a particular paper. That the paper or the color will, or the ink will last as long as it says it should. So I think it's more of a, yeah, I've not done any testing. I've not, honestly, I've just haven't read enough about, there's probably some very good third-party inks, but I've always stuck with the the ink from the manufacturer.
Can I just put my 2 cents in that?
Yeah, please do, Gary.
Yeah. Just like I said earlier, inexpensive. The lowest is not always the best way to go. It's more about reliability and trust. And me personally, I'm not saying that because I work for a camera store. I say that for my own personal things. I'll support a local business because I know them and trust them. And that means more to me than just going to save another $5-6. With that being said, what I tell you, that there may be like there's many inexpensive other options out there offering stuff, but most of them I would not trust. I would not trust them. There's maybe 1 or 2 that are kind of reliable out there that I would trust, but majority of the stuff out there I would not trust. That's just my personal opinion. I personally would go with the name brands and pay the extra money and not having to worry about having the stuff getting wrong, something burnt out, and then getting on a call and getting on things. That might be inexpensive, but if something goes wrong, now you're getting stressed out, you're getting time, you're getting on the phone, you some of that, and that adds time that you don't need. So that's just my personal opinion. On another note, John, I answered the question, but what can you give a little brief thing about comparison between a Canon printer like the Pro 1000? I know I talked about a little bit about that versus like an Epson. For someone who's doing good quality printer, what do you think would be a good printer? I recommend for high end Canon Pro 1000, for Epson P800, but I mean there is a Canon Pro 10 which has got discontinued, but that's a very good printer. But for someone who's doing series printer, I'm not sure if they would go there. I think that'd be more for the middle range. I'm curious what your opinion is on that.
Yeah. So and I guess, how do I put this? Yeah, you can print great work out of I think you can really make some great work out of either one of those printers. I've personally taken the stand where I don't want to, for my needs and for the economy of what I'm doing here is, I don't generally go over 13 by 19. My R3000 has been good, and it does what I need it to do. And a Canon has I'm totally blanking on the name of it now. It's kind of like not a clear coat, but there are, Gary, do you remember what it's called? It is like a clear coat tank that can.
Well, like a replacement tank.
Yeah, I mean it acts like an ink tank, but it's
a maintenance tank, like a maintenance.
Okay. The one thing I don't like about, and I haven't used one of the newer Epsons, but I know this one, switching from black inks to gloss ink to matte ink, you do lose some ink in that process going back and forth. But yeah, I mean, you do want to get a very good printer. If you're going to spend the money on it, this is, one thing, there's the artistic side of this is important to, it helps you grow as a photographer, but, really printing is an investment into, your long-term work. And it's, it's worth putting some money up front for a good printer. And yeah, I would.
I guess the easiest question, if you're gonna do a lot of printing, it's best to invest in a good printer. If you're not gonna do a lot of printing, you don't think you're gonna do a lot of it, but you want it for the thing, then spend your money on like a $300 printer, and then you can always think, if you're gonna do a lot of printing, rather than spending $300 or $400, go for the best and be done with it. It's kind of like buying a tripod. I mean, you spend a lot of money for a camera, but you buy a $30 tripod, and then when your lens breaks, you blame it on the equipment because you don't invest in a good tripod. It's kind of like a tripod. If you're gonna, on something like that, it's always best to invest in the best tripod rather than the thing. So I'd say the same thing in printing. If you're gonna do a lot of printing, instead of trying to go for the best and do the thing. If you're not gonna do a lot of printing, then go with a less expensive one. Is that what you would agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yeah. It's also knowing what you're going to put into it. I love seeing bigger prints than 13 by 19, but I just know the economy of what I want to spend, and that type of thing. It's 13 by 19 is kind of where as far as a monetary investment, what I can put into it, that's the sweet spot for me. But I'd love to have a bigger printer for sure. But
all right, thanks.
Okay, yeah. All right, so then let's do this next. Let me pull up my Zoom here. Let's see. I'm going to. How do I do this? Our use. Okay. Are you guys seeing my Photoshop now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's get into, yeah. So basically at this point, kind of want to, if we're going to pretend, I guess, just this is where, we're going to get into kind of the mechanics of how to, take your finished image and send it to a printer. At this point, you've gone through, the process of editing an image and getting it to the point where you feel like you've chosen an image that's worthy of a print. You've gone through, you've kind of gone in and taken all the things out that you want taken out. You've adjusted it and you've kind of tuned it to your liking. And now you want to take this from the digital world to the physical world through a print. And so there's some things that you should be aware of and that should know through the process here. And like I said, what I want to do is really review the process of making this happen. So once you have the print, then you've got to decide what you want to print it on. So what type of paper. So I always recommend having a couple papers in mind that you like. There's whether it's a luster paper or a matte paper. A Baryta paper is really nice too. But have a couple that you're familiar with and that you've printed on enough that you understand how the paper really reacts to images and that type of thing. So you can kind of go into this knowing that, if I look at this image, I can say, there's some texture in the buildings here, but there's, a lot of movement in the streets. you know, I want the Radio City Music Hall, you know, that can be, you know, so I'm just kind of evaluating the image as I see it here for the paper. I really like Baryta papers. I know Red River Paper makes one, Canson and Moab have their own Baryta, but I really like how that paper looks. So, you know, I've kind of identified the paper I would like to print on. So now the next step is to do something called soft proofing. Soft proofing will give you a representation on screen of how your image will look like on a particular paper. So what this is going to do is it's going to use that paper profile that we mentioned before, and then kind of give you a representation of that that image through that paper profile. So it's going to show you how as best as a monitor can, it's going to show you a representation of that image. So I don't think I've got a Baryta on this computer, but so if I were to take an Arctic polar satin, what this is doing now is I'm going to toggle preview on and off. You can kind of see the tones change a little bit. And what this is representing to you is how that paper is going to influence that image. And so if I'm going to change it to a different, if I use a matte paper, you can see how the image got flatter, less contrasty. So this is just, it's giving you a representation of how that image will look on the paper. And the paper profile's job is to take the information here and translate it to the paper. And one way that you do that is through the rendering intent. There are two rendering intents that you use for photography reasons, that you'll hear: relative, colorimetric, and then perceptual. And this, probably the easiest way to represent this is through here. So there are the two rendering intents. Do something different with the image, if you will. So perceptual, it's going to, the B at the bottom is we'll call it the gamut of the paper, or what the printable tonal range and color range of the paper. And then above it, you'll see the A is that represents the range of tones in an image. And so that there's this translation process that has to happen. They've got to get that image to paper. And there's inevitably, on a lot of images, there's going to be what's called out of gamut areas. Out of gamut represents tones that just aren't possible to print on that particular paper. And so your paper profile has to work with those out of gamut areas in some way. And that's where relative and perceptual come in as the rendering intent. The relative rendering intent will take all of the information in an image that can be represented on the paper, and not change it, and directly translate it to the paper, if you will. And then it'll take the out of gamut areas and bring them to just the edge of what's in gamut. So it's going to maintain everything that's in gamut, and then it's going to compress everything that's out of gamut to the edge of what's possible to print on. The alternative to that is perceptual. Perceptual will kind of squeeze everything in. It's going to maintain the relationships in tones, but what it's going to do is the image will change a little bit, but it maintains relationships. And then there are people out. I personally use perceptual a lot, but I frankly think it's just a matter of, if you see a positive change in the way your image looks on screen when you toggle between relative and perceptual, there's no policing of this. Just choose what looks best when you're soft proofing. So this is a common term you'll hear in printing: relative or perceptual. It just relates to how the paper profile translates out of gamut information to the paper. speaking of out of gamut, there is a setting here called gamut warning. And what that's going to do is it's going to identify the areas that are outside of gamut. So it's going to tell you, that there are the areas that your paper profile is going to move into gamut, whether that's through perceptual or relative rendering intent. So here is this is a matte paper. You can use the soft proofing feature here. You can use it to choose a paper. You can identify how much image information is going to need to be translated. So, I mean, your paper profile does the heavy lifting for you, but this gives you the ability to see the areas that are going to be impacted by the rendering intent. Another important thing is you want to make sure your black point compensation is checked here. And you also want to simulate the paper color too. But I'll toggle this on and off. That shows you, and for demonstration purposes here, I'm just using a matte paper. But if I were to print it, I would use a satin type paper. And so that's soft proofing. You can go in here if you want to change anything, if you want to, increase the shadow areas or the midtones, based on what you know about your printer, then that can often lead to better prints. For me, I will go and make a levels adjustment. I'll increase I'll raise the midtones a little bit, and I've found that that's a good way for me to, this is called editing for print. I understand that how my printer works. I've put enough paper through it that I get a little better print to, what I find a more pleasing print by raising the midtones up a little bit. And then now it just becomes a matter of sending it to the printer. It's a simple print dialog. I've got my Epson R3000 here. Change the layout. You want to make sure that you choose Photoshop manages colors. You don't want the little brain of the printer doing any work for you here. You've gone through the soft proof. You want to use the paper profile that you used during soft proofing. Choose the same rendering intent that you used. And then, of course, use the same, what were we talking? Printer settings. Make sure by default, your color mode should be off, so there's no color management. You want to make sure you're using the correct media type for the paper that you're using. Just, stuff like that. You want to make sure that, you follow the manufacturer's suggestions there, but you want to make sure that Photoshop manages colors, and you want to choose the paper profile for it too. Lightroom is a great program too to print from, and this is perhaps a little easier to get into soft proofing. So this is again, this is an image that's kind of ready to go. Soft proofing, I believe, by default's on the bottom panel here. What you're going to do, what it does for you here is that it shows you your image against paper white, and that can often be. You can do that in Photoshop too. You can right click on the backgrounds, select custom color, choose white, and that's going to help give you a better representation of how your image is going to look in print. Lightroom does it for you automatically. You want to make sure your gamut warnings are on. It's up here in the top right-hand corner of your histogram, and gamut warnings for turn both of those on. Again, this is where you choose the profile, and then your rendering intent here. So relative, perceptual, and frankly, just do either one, click on either one, see what you like better. and go with the one you like better. And then in the print dialogue here, not the print dialogue, or the print, I'm blanking on it, up here in the print. Make sure it's helpful to turn a little sharpening on, color management, choose the same profile you use, the same rendering intent. And then you can go from there. So and then choose the right settings here. Just make sure that your color management is set to off. Choose the right media type for the paper that you're going to use, and that will give you a good print. So just a little bit about print evaluation. Make sure you're looking at the print with a daylight balanced bulb. Make sure you're using plenty of light. Just keep in mind the light that the room environment that you're in for, a darkened room is different for editing on your screen than it is for viewing a print. So, make sure you're using a good amount of light. If you know the environment that it's going to be in, take it to the environment and look at it. If you need to make a reprint, then you can edit. There's nobody saying that you can't make a test print, and you can't print the image several times to get it to turn out the way you want it to for the environment. But what color management will do is it'll give you predictable results in your work. And that's kind of one of the things that that does come up a lot in our work with customers, is that viewing a print in a dark room is not going to give you a good representation of your outcome. You really do want to view it in plenty of light. Let your image dry. Before you do anything with it, like framing, I give it a day. I mean, it's still gonna, there are some that would say that it still is gonna change a little bit, but let the inks dry, let it off gas. Handle on the edges, use white gloves or some kind of cotton non-acid gloves to handle a print. Acid is going to be the enemy of the print. Make sure you're using acid-free. If you're going to frame something, use acid-free matting, use acid-free backing, use the acid-free tape to mount the print, mount it on the top. A hinged print is really the way to go. And just make sure that you use an acid-free environment. That's going to give you the ability to keep that image as you intended longer. You can use an acid-free box to store the prints in. I've got a 13 by 19 box that, if I make a print and I know it's not for show immediately, I'll put it in the box, and that's a good environment that will keep a print lasting. So again, the environmental factors is what you want to make sure you're protecting that print from.
What is the durability of the inks these days with these printers? Like, well, you're printing, so you're not a commercial printer.
Yeah. Were you able to see that in Lightroom? I'm sorry. All right. Now are you seeing what I'm seeing? Lightroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Did it just switched over to Lightroom?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. I'm sorry about that. As far as inks go, I think it's 200 years. And I think it has to do with paper and ink. Gary, has Epson or Canon done any training that they've said that you're familiar with, or
As far as what years, how many lifetime on inks you mean?
Yeah, the longevity of inks.
They last pretty long. I'm not sure the exact time on it, but if you want to send me an email, Terry, and send me an email that I can research it for you and with my team and get back to you.
That's okay. I mean, and I guess things I would ask would be about, you say, set them up for the environment, but I assume having sunlight on them, a lot is not going to help you.
No, it's not going to help. UV glass is probably the best. If it's going to be in, yeah, I mean, direct light is always going to, UV and acid. They're the two big factors. Using that, going the extra step for that glass is never a bad idea. That'll help with longevity, and that's going to. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be in direct light, but.
So let me ask you something else. A couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, we had a couple sessions with a fellow who sounded like he was part of the designer with the light room, and he does some pretty amazing things with Lightroom alone without going to Photoshop. But every time, all I'm saying is he had a lot of expertise.
Sure.
But a lot of the photos I saw, he really punched them up. He talked about having them punched up for printing. But what you're saying is it's a much more subtle approach with going in setting it up correctly so that the soft proof looks correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a monitor can show a wider range of color and tone than a piece of paper can. And you need to think downstream. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. I didn't hear what was said, but I would agree in the sense that you want to, you want to serve the image. If you want a vibrant image, go ahead and do that. But your paper considerations will dictate some of that too. So
well, it just seemed that this rule of thumb was to make it like either more vibrant, more contrasty, more everything stronger to account for what would happen in the printing process. And I'm not hearing that from you, though.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I would like to emphasize that question again and more. You do all diligence with comparing your desired image to the soft proof image. You do all kind of adjustment, including local adjustment if necessary, to match colors or replace something which is out of gamut. And you expect the printer to produce exact result, which you see on the screen, even comparing that the screen is usually brighter. But all these precise measurements, all this tuning, all this work really makes you think that you are going to get what you're expecting. And when you push the button and printer does the job, it's so much off that you don't know what happened. Yes, there are additional adjustments for the contrast and for the brightness. You do that arbitrarily. You don't know what you're doing actually. You do get guesswork, and that is not enough. So what you normally do to get your print in the way how we want it, you print a small size and you do adjustment. Or there is some software by Canon, for instance, that they let you, I think they give you a little mosaic result, which is not that easy to comprehend and read correctly. So you can impose right corrections. And also these corrections only boil down to these two parameters, contrast and brightness. So why don't we, after all this hassle, after all these measurements, all these settings, all this work in making two images side by side similarly the same, we don't get the results we expect?
Yeah. So I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
Well, the question is that you do everything by science.
Okay.
Everything you use calibrated devices. You do the calibration of you get the profile from the paper if you have this wonderful studio and so on. The spectrophotometer for the paper. You create your own ICC for the combination of printer, ink, and paper. You expect that you've done diligence. You've done everything is to the letter. So you bring these two images side by side in, let's say, in Lightroom, and you see that image of a soft-proof image is visually equal to what you expect, what you had in a previous processing of your image. So you expect the printer will do the job automatically, and it doesn't.
Well, I would say it to an extent. So there is a, I think you'd agree with me that there's a big difference between a monitor and a print.
Of course.
Your monitor has a greater ability to show more range of tones and that type of thing.
But isn't that the purpose of soft proofing?
The purpose
to compensate for this.
Soft proofing will show you, it'll show you the influence of the rendering intent. So you see what's in gamut, what's out of gamut.
Right.
It gives you the ability to maximize the range of tones for a particular paper. But there, I don't disagree with everything. I don't disagree with basically what you're saying. Is that there's a difference in a monitor, there's a difference in a print, and as much as soft proofing is very helpful. Using a custom ICC profile or a generic ICC profile, they're very helpful. But to an extent, the print should stand alone. You're not going to be able to get everything out of your monitor onto a print. There's no problem making a test print to see what your monitors, or to see how your image is going to look on a piece of paper. But what color management will do is it'll give you consistency. And that's really the whole point of this, is to give you a consistent screen over a long term. If you have multiple screens, it'll give you a consistency between those screens. And then you do become familiar with how your printer is looking, or your printer prints, and then your monitor, and how those relationships work together. But soft proofing will give you an idea of what you're going to get on that paper. And there is a process of sometimes it's okay to make a couple prints, but the color management, the calibrating your monitor, using a profile, it's all meant to hone in on that final outcome.
John, can you hear me?
I can.
My microphone's been a problem. What I'm hearing you say in lay terms, because I know nothing about printing, is that when I looked at the picture of Radio City that you originally showed,
yeah,
through all the processes to come to what the printed picture would look like, it looked very, very different than the original.
Mm-hmm.
I really want that original. Then in that particular case, I may have to blow out the colors a little more in the beginning, so that as I come back down, I'm closer to my original. Is that roughly what you're saying? Because I saw paper and it gave it a very flat look, and it lost some of the intensity. So
yeah.
I make my Photoshop or my Lightroom more intense to get to what the original looked like.
Right. And you can bring some of that back. You have, you can see what the image is going to look, you see what the influence is, and you can go in there and edit an image with the soft proofing on. You can add some of that back in. So there's nothing wrong with doing that, but this is, but I did see what you mean. It does make it flat a little bit, but you see it's meant to show you how the certain papers will influence that image.
So John, I think there's maybe three approaches we're talking about here. If you talk about the Lightroom guy, he was basically saying, punch it up in the beginning and soft proofing, the paper, it might, wash it out a little bit. And so if you punch it up, then you minimize the soft proofing and you print the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Your approach was you got your original image on the screen. Now you go to soft proof. It's not the way I like it. So then you punch it up there or adjust it however you want and then print it. And hopefully you're getting a pretty good rendition. Then Leo is saying, well, I do all that and it still doesn't come out right. So another approach, so his approach is do a test print and start adjusting from there. So I'm almost hearing three different ways to get to the end point.
Okay.
Basically, if I might to add, until the point you have the software as the proofed image on your screen equal to your original image or desired image, you are print technician. From that point, between Lightroom and a printer, you become a print artist. You have to do the guesswork. You have to feel it. You have to sense it, what you can or cannot do to get the desired result. And there is no straightforward path to get to the point you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all some kind of a plus minus here, more contrast, more brightness. Maybe there's some even tweaking of the color, because it's all in conjunction, all in interdependency. You touch this, you touch brightness, your colors get off. You touch the contrast, you're losing details. So it's a multivariant process, which very hard to, especially for the novice, and that's what makes printing scary for people.
Yeah.
It's not a great level of predictability of the result.
Yeah.
So you better send it to lab and let them deal with all this. And you just simply can't say, okay, I reject that, I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
You screwed up. But when you do it for yourself, you screw up.
Yeah.
it's your result. There is no way around this. So what I am trying, I've been doing printing 5 years, and I still haven't gotten enough confidence that I can guess right adjustments from the first print out.
Yep. Yeah. And I thank you for saying that. If I don't want to minimize I think the way you described it, as far as the technician and the artistry, if I've minimized the artistic side of making a print, that's certainly not my intent. You're right that there are technical things that you can do to set yourself up for success, but there's an artistry behind it that if I have minimized that was definitely not my intent, and I thank you for emphasizing that where I guess I haven't. But yes, there is the artistry behind making a print. It's not just hit print and you've got wonderful results. There's a lot that goes into it. It's something that seasoned printers don't. I feel like I'm very familiar with the process and the artistry behind it, but there are people that I've worked with that make incredible prints that have been doing it, that it's something they've pursued for many years. And so yes,
to your point, whatever we got to that point from your information you provided, it's basically what I can read in a manual or someone on a YouTube channel. What I'm interested in the artist part. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
That's what the mystery, where mystery begins.
Yeah.
And that's what that's the information which we I don't normally hear from other people.
Mhm.
How they touch and feel it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is to understand what you want to get out of it. So if it's part of its you know, the way that I've practiced it, or if you know, if you want to put it that way, it's really about, you know, practicing making the prints. If you want to, it's a matter of trying different things, seeing different you know, how far you want to push that soft proof, the edits. It's trying different papers. Uh, it's a lot of it's like shooting, you know, developing your style and developing the artistry. I don't know if it's something I can, you know, quantify in 5 or 6 different things, but you're right, the artistry behind it is something that's a tough thing to teach.
John, do you go through the iterative process that Leo was talking about? I mean, what you told us, you know, I take the Lightroom guy as being kind of the crude approach, you know, and he may do a lot more after. But your approach, you know, is dialing right in, as you were saying, as you guys are talking about technical person, and that's dialing in nicely. But then once you try to print it, do you find yourself going back and iteratively and trying to modify things, and how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to make a print of this, you know, if I would start off by making a smaller print than what I wanted. So if a 13 by 19 was the ultimate goal, I would most likely print it smaller, maybe an 8 by 10. And what that will ultimately show are things that you just don't see on your monitor. Things that show up in prints are, you know, if there are dust spots on the sensor, you can see that in on screen oftentimes, but sometimes you do miss that. It gives, you know, making a test print allows you to kind of get into the physical world instead of the digital world, and then evaluate the print on that aspect. You know, gives you the ability to, you know, I like using a pen. You know, I like using like the Apple Pencil if I'm working on an iPad. So, you know, I've taken, you know, a red pen and gone in and marked up areas in the print where I know that I want to improve, and then I can get myself up from the computer, evaluate something physical in the physical world, and then take that back to the printer, and then you can make iterative, you know, prints from there before you make that larger print. That's a way to hone the image. You know, like in the darkroom, you know, dodging and burning, and, you know, it takes several, you know, understanding what tools work to massage the image the way you want it to end up. You know, that's one step that I take in my own work.
So are some images just not really very printable? I mean, I've heard, and you haven't mentioned it, I've heard something on the order of, like, you know, you got 5 stops or something range in printer on printers versus you know, on the screen you have, I guess, unlimited stops, whatever it is. So maybe there are certain limitations in printing that probably aren't there on displaying an image on a screen.
Well, I mean, you know, there can be a you know, some images you can invest a lot of time into getting the print. I would say I would look at it from the point of, is it worth putting the time into making the print? To going through that exercise of, if you're going to make a test print and really hone that image, whether you want to, you know, I understand what you mean as far as technical, you know, there are 5 stops of exposure that you can get or whatever, but I would look at it more from the point of, you know, is an image worthwhile of, you know, taking it from screen to print?
Usually it takes me 3 test prints before I can more or less justify big print.
Yeah.
The problem is that for every type of the paper, you need to have 4x6 for the testing. And that also takes time and extra expenses. Of course, there's no other way around. I do not see. However, I know that labs somehow do that. So they have people who know how to actually score from the first time.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm looking for that wisdom for the or perhaps maybe some tips and hints how to get to the point where I want to be in the most productive, efficient, and artistic way. So the rest, how to push buttons, how to impose corrections, how to adjust your monitor and thing. It's a complicated. It's important, but you can get it done just literally following instructions. From that point on, there's not much of a reading material to learn from. That's what I personally looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
John, doesn't a guy maybe not as skillful, but doesn't some, like, you know who John Greger is, right?
Oh
John
yeah,
Greger?
yeah.
Doesn't he know a lot? Wouldn't he be able to fill in some of those questions?
John's a great resource. Yeah, John has many years above, or many years of experience beyond me. I would certainly recommend John as a resource for printing.
So this could be a whole the printing thing could be a whole program by itself. So
yeah,
we could talk for hours about that. So if you're looking for that type of thing, is that a real resource to you guys? More printing type of thing? That could be a whole program, right? So we could go on a whole night talking about this. We're starting to lose some people because of that. Yeah. But if you want that type of thing and that's value too, I can work on bringing this, connecting with John Greger and having him come on and do a program all by himself. He's a huge resource, and I think he'll be able to answer some of those questions for you.
For those of us who are more advanced and have done already a substantial amount of works, that probably will be wonderful. I understand that for those who are just making first steps into printing, even going through the using the spectrophotometers and adjusting the monitors and getting just the formal part in place. It's some kind of a challenge, but it can be overcome because there is not much of the guesswork there. You just need to be diligent and follow manuals, follow instructions to the letter.
I'll work on lining up. I'll work on that, lining up that contact for you.
Yeah, John will be a good resource. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, that's really all I have. If Gary, I'm going to go ahead and show.
One more question, if I may.
Yeah.
I noticed that you use all most recent updates for Photoshop and Lightroom.
Yeah.
Any changes in relation to printing? Any new stuff there, or it's all standard? No changes.
Yeah, there really isn't functionally anything that's different.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
I expected that, but just in case, maybe they did something which I haven't noticed.
No, it's a good fair question. No, nothing changed. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I think I know, Gary, you're sending these out after.
Yes, you can talk about them, but yes, I did send it to her. That she's gonna send it out after tonight or tomorrow. But yes, with all the clickable links, stuff like that. But you feel free to talk about it briefly.
Yeah, sure. Just real quick then. SpiderX Pro and SpiderX Elite are the two display calibration tools we make. The Pro is meant for somebody who's using a single monitor photography workflow. You know, you can use it on multiple computers, but the Elite is best suited for somebody using multiple displays. It has a photography and videography workflow. You can calibrate projectors with it if you have a projector. So they're really two, you know, just two very good systems for correcting displays. Spider Print is the tool that you make custom ICC profiles for printers. And then Spider X Studio, that kind of combines everything. So that's the Spider X Elite, Spider Cube, and the Spider Print. That's all in one bundle. So they're all, you know, discounted here. Spider X Pro 99, X Elite, it's $100 off at $169. Spider Print's also $100 off, and then $150 off of the Studio.
Mhm. What was the previous version before X Pro? Was it 4?
It was 5. Yeah.
Oh, 5. Okay,
Yeah.
so I two versions behind. Any significant changes between 4 and X Pro? So
Yeah.
I'm thinking about justifying the upgrade.
Sure. Yeah. So the big difference you'll see is in the sensor. Besides taking readings a lot quicker than the previous versions, so it'll calibrate in under 2 minutes. It's better suited to some of the newer display technology, especially from Apple. They have the P3 monitors that are capable of P3 gamuts. It's able to calibrate those better than the previous models. That's where you see, you know, really big identifiable difference in the look. You know, even on standard monitors, you're probably going to see just a little bit larger gamuts that you can get out of it if you're comparing one to the other. But yeah, the X is fully supported on, you know, anything that's you know, any of the newer technology that's out there.
Okay, may I ask you a politically incorrect question? Don't worry, I don't get you in trouble. At least I hope so.
I think I know where this is going, but go ahead.
Okay. I know that some of our members have Color Monkey.
Okay.
And can you compare?
Mm-hmm.
I understand that you're presenting here. You're sponsoring that particular brand, but in your view, is there any weakness or advantages? Kind of comparison analysis, if you could.
Sure. Well, this is what I'll say about, you know, comparison from Datacolor to X-Rite or back and forth. You know, I know people from X-Rite. I think you know, I think I think both companies make very good tools. You know, I mentioned that we do a lot of, you know, work outside the photo industry. X-Rite's our main competition out there too. So it's something we're very familiar with. But you know, the advantages are, you know, when I started working as an interior and architectural photographer, that's when I had color problems, and that's when I went to Datacolor. And that's where I first learned about color management and that type of thing. And so for me, it's you know, I've seen the people behind it. I've used it as a customer first. And it's something that I've always trusted and relied on as a tool to help me in my work. You know, I'm not going to say anything negative against X-Rite. I think they make a very good sensor. I think they make a good product. I think what I'm concerned is that you're thinking color management. I think that's good. You know, I'm not gonna, you know, as far as anything beyond that, I think, you know, I have a lot of respect for X-Rite as well. But I do recommend Datacolor because of everything else that I've seen behind the company, and it's suited me very well in my own work too.
Okay.
Do you want me to give my opinion on it, John? Or?
Yeah, please do, Gary. I mean, this is go for it. This is definitely.
Okay, I personally think, in my point of view, that both X-Ray and data color makes both choices. I mean, both make good products, and
Yep.
I personally believe that it's really a personal preference as
Yep.
to which one you like the best. That's just my honest opinion. That both, you can't go wrong with either one of them. You're not
Yep.
gonna be a better photographer, a better thing by going data color over X-Ray or vice versa. I personally think it's best analogy is I like bananas, somebody likes apples. You know, I really believe it's a personal preference there. They both make great products. I've heard great things about data color. They love it. They swear by it. I've heard great things about X-Ray. They swear by it. So it's in my personal opinion, that's just my opinion. I think it's a personal preference.
Well, I didn't have chance to compare. However, I do own the Spider Sense version 2. So it's probably 5 or 6 years at least. As soon as I started doing printing, and I can attest that it's a pretty stable piece of hardware. However, with early versions, I had some compatibility issues between computers, and with issue with multiple monitors for that matter. I think on early versions, I presume that this version allows for dual monitor to be calibrated.
It does, yeah. And dual monitors. So Spider X Pro and Spider X Elite will both calibrate. If you have multiple screens on one computer, it'll calibrate both of them. The X Elite has additional tools that will help you get the best consistency possible between the two of them.
However, there is one more device which is kind of out of scope here, and sometimes it I must say I do have a problem when I do a presentation. Let's say in my house, I have big smart TV, and when I send over my pictures for the enjoyment of the audience, and they complain it's or too vivid or too sharp or too something is off, and I do not see the way to use that device to calibrate my TV so it will produce the same images as I can enjoy on my darkroom monitor.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean the monitor calibration uses it creates a profile that's applied through the video card. You calibrating an independent TV that's not connected to a computer is, there's no place to apply the correction, and so that's why televisions can't be calibrated on their own. You can connect it to a computer, and as long as that and calibrate it, and as long as that that display or that TV is connected to the computer, then it can be calibrated. But independent displays like that can't be done.
Though I see you can calibrate projectors.
Yeah, the Elite can. And again, that needs to be connected at all times to a computer. So if you're doing a presentation, that would be an ideal.
I understand that.
I don't usually hear people if they're using X-Ray products. I don't usually hear people say I'll switch to data color or vice versa. Usually when they have one brand, they stick with one brand. They don't go back and forth like sometimes you're a Nikon shooter and you give up a Nikon, you go Canon. I don't really see people switching systems. They invest in one system. They're usually pretty loyal to that system. Would you agree with that, John?
I would agree with that. Yeah, that's what I've seen. Yeah, I think that's my experience from the people I've talked to. I mean you have guys. We've been everywhere together, Gary.
You have guys like you have guys like Eddie Tapp. I don't know if you ever heard of Eddie Tapp. He's a Wayne talk. He's a huge fan of X-Ray. You have a guy like a George Lepp, big wildlife niche talker, who's a huge fan of of data color. So it's really goes back to personal preference. I don't believe George Lepp was ever sponsored by data color. I know Eddie Tapp was, but I know George is a big name thing. I don't think he ever was any type of sponsorship with data color. So yeah, it all goes down to personal preference.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, John, we're going to ask you to unshare your screen a second.
Okay. Yep.
everybody will get an email with this information in it tomorrow. Don't just send me a text message and I'll make sure you get it. John, I've never really been involved with printing, and I've been very curious about getting my own system. You gave me some great information and helped me understand how it is actually done. And when I go back and look at my pictures now, they've never looked like what I started with.
Mm-hmm.
Never even considered any of those things. So now I have a whole different perspective on it, and I'm looking forward to getting involved with it.
Yeah, well, thank you.
And I think there are people in the club who getting ready to start doing our own printing.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking so much time with us and waiting for our group. From what I've heard through the grapevine here, everybody is glued to this television, which is not even moving. I think what happens is they heard that we were going to have this recorded. So
Okay.
they have to talk to me for 2 hours before I release it to them. Which, but we really appreciate it. And Gary, I love hunts. I've been to several of the webinars that you've been connected to. And John, I've seen you at PSA before. So
Oh, yeah.
we appreciate you coming to our club. And if you're ever in Richmond, either one of you, please come and join us. We have a phenomenal group. And,
Well, I'd like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
and thank you to everybody who is here tonight and everybody who asked all the questions that you asked. If you have any others, if you look on the chat email, if you don't get it, I do have it and I'll include it. And John, I have your email too.
Yeah.
And John, those snow geese are just up the road towards Richmond from you, and near Curl's Neck. And actually, anybody who's interested in birds, if you look on I think the Cornell website,
Okay.
eBird, they you can see when these birds have been spotted. Various birds, whatever it be, snow geese. This the swans. What are they called? The Arctic swans. People report in, and people come look and take photos. And thank you too. I didn't know much about the ins and outs of printing. I learned a lot tonight too. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
And Terry, you're going to have to let me know what a snow goose looks like, because all of a sudden the geese in my yard are about 5 times the size they were a couple of weeks ago. It might be a little different than they were last time you were here.
They're easy to catch now.
Much easier. Big birds before.
Yeah.
But they might.
That's called a turkey.
Yeah, we know it's for dinner.
I put my email in chat too, so feel free if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, or I put my email in chat. The email that we sent out, Noel will be the contact person. If you have any questions or anything, keep my email chat. You can feel free to reach out to me anytime. You guys can follow me on Facebook if you want. I put my Facebook thing, and I'm also on Instagram now. So if you guys want to be inspired and see some great stuff, go follow me. Go see my Facebook page. I'm doing some really unique stuff on my page. So.
Well, everybody have a happy Thanksgiving. I think I'll see some of our members in the next week or so, but everyone else have a wonderful holiday and be safe. And thank you both.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for everything. All right. Thanks.
Take care.